Hello, Baker Economics students. I hope everyone is having a good weekend. So we were wrapping up week one and wanted to give you a preview of week two. So first, just want to say everybody's doing a great job in the forum discussion. So I really appreciated all the discussion and interaction. So just keep that going on through the course. That is one of the ways that we learn from each other. I learned from you. So, but just make sure to wrap up everything from week one before midnight tonight. And then, like we kind of do a rinse and repeat in this course. So next week you have another forum discussion related to the topics, chapters 14 through 18. Do your quiz and then do your homework. And again, if you have any questions, just email me. I'll try to get back to you that day or the following day at the latest. So it's now about 7:43 this morning. So I usually post these every Sunday morning to give an overview of the next week. But doing some schoolwork myself throughout the day, and then I'll check email late this afternoon and tonight. So with these chapters this week, chapter 14 through 18, give you an overview of those and the readings you're going to do this week. The first really kind of talks about how firms organize the different inputs and resources for production, whether that's land, labor, or capital. We have to remember that firms are trying to do this in the most technically efficient way and the most economically efficient way. So regardless of what they're trying to produce, whether it's a hamburger at a McDonald's or a service through like a bank or a hospital, they have to strategically think about how I'm going to input all these resources to get the final product or service to the consumer. And they want to be thoughtful about that, and they want to be thoughtful about their cost. And what you're going to see in the textbooks is what we call like a production function. Kind of at some point it's called a increasing at a decreasing rate or diminishing marginal returns. It reaches a maximum, and this is making an assumption that all other inputs are fixed. If I kept adding, say, something like labor, more and more of it, we'd expect that benefit to decline each time as I add that additional unit of labor, whatever that input would be. I always like to use the example of a garden. I remember one summer I drove with my boys at my relatives. They have these kind of box plots, but we had some good intentions. But, you think about like fertilizer or Miracle-Gro. If you have none, you maybe get some output, but you start to add the Miracle-Gro, and your output starts increasing, but at some point it can actually make the soil too acidic. So when you're trying to grow a garden, there's all these variable inputs. It's the seeds you use, how much water, how much sunlight, pest control, and you try to maximize that output in the garden by using the right formula and the right investment to maximize the number of vegetables that you can get out of that 10 by whatever 12 space it was at that time. So businesses are doing the same thing too. They have to think strategically about those resources. So with this, you're going to learn a lot about the cost curves, the idea of marginal cost, the change in total cost over the change in quantity produced. That's marginal cost. Later chapters, you're going to get into marginal revenue. It's the change in total revenue over Q, or output. And then with these cost curves, what you're going to notice is this U shape to them with average variable cost, average total cost, marginal cost. In fact, that marginal cost is going to intersect at the bottom of the average variable cost and average total cost curve. And the reasons they're U-shaped is because of this diminishing marginal returns. It's not realistic to think that I just keep adding another unit of labor or another input, that my return is just going to keep going up and up and up. At some point, it's going to have negative consequences at a given size plant, space, or time. Things can change in the future. And as we've seen, it's amazing how we do things today. I was at Walmart the other day and I just checked myself out. So there's cameras, technology. Obviously, they felt they got come from a point that they don't need to staff as many people, but you see robots go and clean the floors. So kind of questions if someday we're all going to have be replaced by automatons, and we'll just sit there like that one movie WALL-E and be fat, dumb, and happy. So hopefully we don't get to that point. But anyway, with that, after you go through these chapters, the first one, kind of production and cost, and I encourage you to kind of look at that page 379 because it gives you a good example. Oh, I'm sorry, when we get to perfect competition, look to page 379 because that's our first market structure. And a perfect competition is like the example of the wheat farmer. When the wheat farmer goes to the mill, grain mill, he has to accept whatever the market price is. He can't dictate the price. There's thousands of wheat farmers. It's a homogeneous product. We assume that everybody has the same technology available, so they are a price taker. And that's why when you read this chapter in chapter 15, you'll see a flat, perfectly elastic demand curve. That's what they're showing there on page 378 to 379. But you'll notice what I want you to see is that the total revenue curve is constant, and you have this total cost curve that doesn't start at zero because you have some fixed cost. But it's that point where you have the widest gap between there is where you're maximizing profits. And that's the common theme throughout these chapters, at least for perfect competition, monopoly, monopolistic competition. We always make the output decision where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Now, do managers sit there at firms and count certain things like the number of hamburgers? No, but they do calculate like break-even points, and they understand that they have a certain amount of fixed cost, and they have to cover at least those fixed costs. And then, as the textbook authors were saying, you want to go above and beyond the break-even point. The authors talk about economic profit. So within these average total cost curves you're going to be reading about, I want you to think of it as that if you cover all your explicit, the actual, labor, materials and all that, and your opportunity cost, which is if investors need a 10% required rate of return or 6%, whatever that is. In finance, we typically call this the weighted average cost of capital. Then you're truly just breaking even from a normal profit if I cover all those explicit and implicit costs. It's when you go above and beyond that you're really making positive economic profits, and that's likely going to attract competitors into that industry. The main thing, and I'll spend a lot of time in this chapter 15 for perfect competition because it lays the foundation. What you're going to be looking at is the price relative to these cost curves. So if you're below, the price is below average variable cost, that just says shut down. And then that's, some industries have to do this in COVID-19 because the amount of revenues they have coming in far less than their cost. But if I'm between average total cost, my price is between average total cost and average variable cost, that's kind of like, let's continue to produce to cover some of those fixed costs in the short run. In the long run, we can hopefully make changes. But if the price is exactly equal to average total cost, that's just called a normal profit. We're meeting our opportunity cost. And if the price is above the average total cost, that's making an economic profit. That's a really good thing. That's a positive thing. But again, you're probably going to see, at least in perfect competition, monopolistic competition, more firms recognize that and try to take away some of that economic profit. In theory, we should all get to a point back to where the price is exactly equal to average total cost. Okay, so in chapter 16, kind of just look at this briefly, you're going to talk about the other extreme, monopoly. And we do have some monopolies in the United States. A lot of these are regulated, like utility companies. And they actually have to go before boards and justify any price increases and show that this just exactly meets the investor's opportunity cost. The U.S. postal system has exclusive rights to delivery of mail to the home. There are other types of delivery, but at least for letters and those, they have exclusive rights. And certain companies have patents over, like say, pharmaceuticals that are granted for a certain period of time to allow them to recoup their research cost. And usually when those patents expire, you see the prices of those drugs, be it Lipitor, whatever, that it goes back to what we would call a normal price. But monopoly, the thing about that, because you don't have to worry about any other entries into the market, you can earn a economic profit for a long period of time. And that's some of the controversies you see in the readings about Microsoft and other firms. And Rockefeller, he was actually in real terms the wealthiest man to ever live. He controlled about 90% of the world oil production. But he told his wife one time, sometimes you have to go against the grain. And he made a fortune at a very young age by understanding that if you control the oil of these backwoods places in Pennsylvania, he made secret deals with the railroads. Once all the other refineries found out about it, they cashed out to him in low prices, and he quickly controlled the world oil market. So, and even when the government tried to punish him, he told on a golf course, buy stock in Standard Oil, because when they did break it up, he still owned all the stock. So they tripled his wealth. So anyway, monopoly being the other extreme. But it is possible for monopoly not to make a profit. Even if you have exclusive rights on a patent, if people don't want it, it doesn't guarantee that you're going to make a profit. So you're going to read a little bit more about that. You're going to read about price discrimination too. The idea to try to segment markets. You can only engage in price discrimination if you can have different markets that you can identify. Say someone that's a senior citizen may get a better price than someone that is not. They base this on elasticity of demand, not being altruistic. They do this the same as you as college students. If you have a Baker ID, I think you can maybe get into a movie. At least they used to do this at a lower price if you had student IDs. But they're trying to segment markets, and you can't resell the product. But the idea is try to capture more of the area under that demand curve and more consumer surplus to make more profit. All right, monopolistic competition, talk about this. But monopolistic competition is, I would say, the most prevalent market structure out there. It's kind of interesting. I would say that firms are becoming more perfectly competitive in the sense that information is available everywhere. We have information on our phones right now. We can look up the price anywhere. We can see where the lowest price is, and it's forced firms, to kind of compete on that pricing. But it's kind of a monopolistic competition. I like to use the restaurant example, the burger, Coke, and French fries. They all do it slightly different, and they all spend a lot of money on advertising, whether it's McDonald's, Burger King's, Hardee's, White Castle, whatever, so, and people like preferences. They like to have differences, so it's the job of advertising to convince you that it's a better burger, better French fries, better Coke, and you should come buy your hamburger at our particular restaurant and go through the drive-through at COVID-19 and whatever coupons or incentives they try, or loyalty programs, or to get you to purchase their product. So you'll notice that monopolistic competition firms, you'll see a lot of TV and radio advertising, but this also brings up their cost curves too. So in the long run, though, again, ideally the price should get to average total cost. And I like to use the restaurant example because they shut down all the time, especially athletes. That's the major #1 rule. If you're a professional athlete, do not own a restaurant because they always end up losing money on these things. They get their family members involved, and it's a mess. Okay, the last one I'll just talk about briefly is oligopoly. So this is a little bit different tiger. This is usually where you just have a few firms and they make interdependent decisions. You're going to look at such things as game theory, Nash equilibriums, like the prisoner's dilemma, but they have to think about, if firm X does this, what is firm Y going to do? So if they are going to offer price matching, or if, let's say that, let's try to think about maybe some of the cereal producers. There's basically Quaker, Post, Kellogg's, General Mills. Interestingly, in this industry, because there's been so many other substitutes, people no longer just consider cereal the staple, and people eat everything. You can get a Sonic cheeseburger in the morning if you want to now. But they have to think about their pricing strategies and how they advertise, and they'll often react to what the other firms do. One thing that I find interesting, though, and you'll read about this in your textbook about economies of scale, lower per unit average total cost that firms try to achieve. I think what we've seen is like a shift in the United States that, although we try to promote competition, you're seeing fewer and fewer firms. They're acting more oligopolistic in nature because of that economies of scale, and it's harder for other firms to survive. You get just kind of these big players. I saw this when I worked in the banking industry. I think at one point in the United States we had like 20,000 banks, and then once they eliminated the state laws, allowed you to cross over to state laws and banking laws, I think it was back in the late 90s, you saw a lot more consolidation of the banks. So Bank of America all over the United States. So, and it's hard for a smaller bank to compete, to all the high fixed costs of the technology, everything you provide. So a lot of times these smaller banks have to partner up. I think there's like a bank of greater Kansas City around here to share that technology costs. So, okay, well that's went a little bit longer this week, but there was a lot to kind of want to cover. But again, if you have any questions, do email me. But again, I don't necessarily get to respond to everyone every week, but I'll try to at least get to everyone through the course. I do read them, but everybody's doing a great job in the discussion. But if you have any questions, do send me an email. But otherwise, have a great week, and I look forward to talking to you online.